You've tuned into InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, a video podcast series. Our episode starts right now. Here's your host, Dominique Vale.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, where you can check in for your dose of stigma-breaking, humor-filling, motivation-loving life hacks and empowering tips to all the medically adultish people in your life. This is our video podcast chat show series, and today is season 4, episode 52. And when I tell you it's going to be jam-packed, it's not my typical notion of jam-packed with lots of fun stories and information. I'm saying it for a bit of a different, unique reason because I don't have one guest. No, and I don't have 2 guests, everyone. I have 3 special guests today. So I'm going to be flexing those 4 seasons of podcast hosting muscles today because we needed lots of different perspectives for this topic. And I'm really excited to get to introduce the 3 lovely women that I have with me today for this topic. So today we're discussing PTS, which is also known as post-traumatic stress, but specifically medical traumatic stress. And trust me, when this is not going to be a traumatizing or melancholy episode. You know me, you know InvisiYouth. We don't do that here. But we know this is an important topic for everyone because for so many of the young adults a part of InvisiYouth and for so many living with chronic illness and disability, the unfortunate thing is that many of us will deal with medical trauma or triggers from our chronic illness or disability experiences. So in order for us to have a way to continue to live and grow through these different medical traumas or triggers, it's important to know more about this and then also know ways to find and seek support for yourself and the family and caregivers we have with us to be able to support us in these parts of our life. So today I'm joined by 3 guests who are all part of the Center of Pediatric Medical Traumatic Stress, which is known as CPTS, which is also celebrating its 20th anniversary this month. We're all board members, and then 2 of them also work for CPTS. So I'm going to introduce the 3 lovely ladies now. We have Gaby Vega, who is the program coordinator with CPTS. We have Dr. Kimberly Canter, a pediatric psychologist and research scientist with Nemours, and Darlene Barkman, who works with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia for many years. And I've known Darlene for over 11 years in patient-centered care when I started giving speeches with CHOP at their new employee orientation. So Darlene's known me since I've looked the same, but it's been over 10 years, trust me. And with CPTS, their main aim really is to empower and improve all of the supports and knowledge around medical trauma and those triggers to address the emotional and psychological needs of all young people, the medical community that supports them, and their caregivers. And one of the major tools that CPTS has is the Healthcare Toolbox, which really is a virtual hub of so many resources that are trauma-focused types of care for family, patients, and the medical community. So you'll hear more about those things throughout, but I'm excited to get to now introduce the 3 people on my show. You'll see them all popping up and hear 3 voices. So everyone, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have all of you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
It's very exciting to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So we're going to be playing Zoom hopscotch at this point, trying to get everybody's voices in and do it. So everyone's going to have a fun time. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, make sure you've also subscribed to there as well. You'll get to see how we're doing this with 4 special guests. And also, like I said, make sure you are subscribing onto our podcast channel where you can listen to us on all different audio podcast platforms, and make sure you stay tuned to the full episode because towards the second half, I'm going to be talking about a story about my own PTS experiences. So I know you guys will all want to hear more about those. So before we get into that, I'm going to be going into our first segment called First Few Words.
First Few Words.
First few words, we're taking a totally new take on one of our original segments we've had, getting to know not only our special guests and the knowledge they have on PTS, but also giving you guys a Cliff Notes crash course version of dealing with PTS in medical trauma, and so that you guys can not only know about it when it's related to chronic illness and disability for you, but also the different challenges around it and how you can initially seek support and find those signs with yourself. So, Kimberly, I'm going to start with you. So from more of like a definitive standpoint, how would you describe PTS, and then what adds layers to it when it deals with more of the medical trauma side?
Sure. So it's a great question and a great way to get this conversation started. So when we're thinking about PTSD or traumatic stress, there are three pieces that need to occur. So there's got to be an event. So there has to be something that's experienced as traumatic. Then that's the second E is actually experience. So the event has to be experienced by the person as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening. And I'm going to circle back to that in a minute. And then the third E is effects. So there have to be effects of that event, how it was experienced for the individual. So I think a way to really distill that down is when we're talking about post-traumatic stress, we're talking about emotional reactions to something scary. And when, most people, when they experience a medical trauma, it's very, very normal for there to be a traumatic stress reaction. So something scary happens, you perceive it as scary, you react and experience certain things. Most people will have that initial spike, and then they'll return over time to what's normal for them. For some people, and our best estimates tell us that this is somewhere in the ballpark of 15 to 30% of children, young adults, parents, siblings will experience persistent reactions that start to impair their daily functioning and affect their recovery or their ability to cope. And that persistence piece is where the official diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder might come into play. And I'm making that distinction here because I want to be really clear that those post-traumatic stress symptoms, those experiences are really common. Most of us who have a scary medical experience will experience some post-traumatic stress. That persistent diagnosis piece, what we think about as PTSD, is less common to have that diagnosis. The last thing I want to say here is there's no objective benchmark or criteria for what makes something traumatic. And I think we're going to keep coming back to that over the course of our conversation, but there's no official criteria like, oh, if you're in the hospital for X number of days or you have this procedure, you have PTS. And if you didn't have it, you don't. This is a very subjective, very individual thing. So it's that perception of threat or that perception of the experience that really steers us in terms of how we're talking about post-traumatic stress for any one person.
Yeah, I really like how you phrased that at first with the 3 E's, because it allows someone who thinks that if they're dealing with something that is beyond their feeling an anxiety over an experience, or like my own comes from how my injury developed. And how that manifests just naturally into my daily life and different experiences. But it's from that you would take it beyond sort of something that makes you a bit anxious to do. And when that really inhibits you from doing anything and that sort of persists longer, that really kind of stems the difference for more people. And I think that kind of goes well into what I was going to then ask Gaby as well, is because I know for so many of the young adults that we work with, they'll always say that when it even comes to their illness or disability, unless their symptoms are severely inhibiting them, they're not going to want to ask for support or seek advice because they think they can then handle it or adapt around it. So warranting that structured support doesn't seem like something they would need to do. So how would you it's a 2-part question. How would you say to young people to kind of counter that mindset of they should seek support or ask questions earlier? And then what would you say are kind of initial signs that someone might notice, oh, this is more than me just being anxious of a certain medical experience or something that I'm dealing with, and something's now actually inhibiting me from doing it?
Yeah, I think, some of the things that Kim mentioned, are really important to note, right? That, experiencing some kind of stress is normal. And it's all kind of about perception. So, kids might find something like getting a shot at the hospital, traumatic, or a long hospital stay. So thinking of that, right? So, but traumatic stress reactions go beyond the usual stress reactions. So at times these reactions can be triggered, by reminders or thoughts of, the traumatic experience. So that could, sometimes the trigger is not so obvious. It could be something, such as sight, smell, or a sound or a person that, reminds you of this event. So it's important, to realize that stress is normal, but also to recognize, what traumatic stress can look like. So, there are 4 main types of traumatic stress symptoms. The first being re-experiencing the event. So that might, someone might say something like, it pops into my mind, or, I get upset when I think about that. The second being avoidance. So, I block it out. I try not to think about it. The third being, changes in, thinking and mood. So, a teen especially might feel very scared, angry, guilty, or ashamed. And that fourth traumatic symptom is hyperarousal. So, you might hear someone say something like, I'm always afraid that something bad might happen, or, I jump at any loud noise. So some red flags, could be, physical reactions, changes in appetite, sleep disturbances, headaches, nausea. So, paying attention to your body and those signs. Emotional reactions, being overwhelmed, helpless, irritable, crying more easily, suicidal or violent thoughts or urges. Behavioral signs like withdrawing or, being isolated. And again, just your mood and, decreased concentration, having more trouble decision-making, distressing dreams. So really paying attention to all those signs, and realizing that it could look different, for everyone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like how you kind of phrased that too with those 4 sort of subsets of it. Really, it allows for a young person to realize that you're able to have stressors around your health and disability experiences or the medical experiences you have. But then when that really does stem into, we'll always say to so many, and for anyone with a chronic illness and disability, you're constantly always told by your medical community, track your illness symptoms. If you're having side effects to medications or treatments we're giving you, new symptoms happening, that you always have to look out for those. And then you'll always, if something's coming up that you're sort of marking for yourself that seems a little atypical to your own diagnosis, it's not worth just sort of throwing it out. I always say it's just sort of like keep it on that side column and sort of the notes of what you have going on. And if you see it continuously coming up, that's something worth mentioning to family members or mentioning to your medical community, because that might be something either secondarily a different diagnosis or medication issue, but it also could be something that you're not really thinking of or focusing on when your sole focus usually is your illness or disability. You don't want to then think something else is sort of popping into the framework of what you're trying to do, which is sort of maintain a stable health for yourself daily. So I think that was a really good point that you were making before. And then going to Darlene, we always hear through what we do with CPTS, but then just in the mainstream culture, there's a lot of perspectives of what PTSD is, and then what medical trauma comes into play when it comes to that. So what would you think are main pieces about medically induced PTS that would help people better understand it if they knew these different pieces of information about it?
That's a really great question. And I feel between Kim and Gaby, what you both shared, you basically described my family over the number of years. And, it is stigmatizing to have PTS and medical PTS because, Kim, you said it so beautifully with it can pop up anywhere and anytime. And, I know for Lauren, my daughter, it's exactly what it does. And it was a hard thing to recognize because it didn't really pop up for years after her treatment stopped. It was probably brewing, but we didn't realize it. And I think as a parent, you need to be open to the fact that more support may be needed, and that's okay. And, for your child to be able to ask for help is really important. And, to, again, both Kim and Gaby, what you shared, and even Dominique, how what you were sharing is so critical because it's a totally different path. And when you're a young adult, you don't want to have to deal with that. Like you've already dealt with whatever the trauma was, and you just really want to put it away. And the more you put it away, the more it bubbles up. And I think helping families, and CTPS has been so wonderful in that it's helping families navigate that and recognize those triggers, recognize those moments, and making it a natural response. So me seeking help or looking for support is a natural response to the experience or the event that I had, or our family had, or my child had. So, I don't want to say normalizing it because I feel like that's not the right word, but making it a natural response. You've experienced something horrendous. And, Kim, I loved how you said trauma is subjective, because I think young adults can get in their head like, well, maybe it wasn't that bad, or I'm making it worse than it really was. And does anybody even believe me? That's the other point. Does anybody even believe me that I'm still experiencing all of this, even though this event happened already and it's in the past? And I think other young adults, your friends, may not see that. They may not have that ability to wrap their own brains around it. So if they've not experienced a trauma, sometimes it is hard. And I think it just requires a lot of patience and a lot of grace and a lot of compassion.
Yeah. I love how you phrase that, Darlene, as well, is that it really is, for young adults, there's always this how perspective comes of other people's perspective of you and how you're dealing with an illness or disability, especially if it's something visibly apparent or people have known about, that really does play a role into then how you're going to deal with sort of the psychological or emotional side of your illness or disabilities, because then that's now something else you feel like you need to explain to somebody else. And now that's something that's more invisible. And that then becomes a whole other conversation of how do I explain this to someone? And it does that perspective of, if I bring up this conversation, it seems like it's dangerous and scary. And now more people don't want to talk to you about it. And then it becomes this sort of distancing of other people going, oh, well, if I'm going to now trigger you in some way, now I'm nervous to even trigger you. And then you're starting to sort of be left out of many conversations and situations. So it's really trying to find a way that you can kind of even be a little bit more in the driver's seat to kind of take a little bit of taking the edge off, if you will, of what that is, so that your family members can even feel more comfortable engaging and asking to help you. But then also for friends or coworkers or classmates, they'll then feel like, oh, okay, I can maybe bring this up because she's comfortable or he's comfortable bringing it up. So I think those are, like you said, what the three of you are mentioning is really important to kind of have that dialogue open with to begin with. And that's a good point to kind of end on the more educational side of what we're talking about today. But before we go into our next segment, you guys know that while I always just mentioned that you guys can talk openly about different parts of your illness or disability, you know that we love some subtle activism here at InvisiYouth. And because of that, we made sure that when we opened InvisiYouth Charity Shop, that our different merch that we would be bringing in would be all about our brand of subtle activism. Like we said, it's the Game of Thrones Starbucks cup in the background. We want you to know about the chronic illness and disability space for young adults, but for it to be something subtly you're curious about. So that is how we designed all of our different merch that will be coming into the shop. You'll see a graphic popping up next to me about it. I'm wearing it now. We have our color block subtle activist bracelet. They're handmade by young adults who have chronic illness and disability, and they are distributed and done through our store by our volunteers as well. So 100% of all the sales go towards our funding our programming and resources that are providing for free every month for young adults with chronic illness and disability around the world that work with us and that we're able to provide aid to. And it's only $4, guys, and you get like a really cool chic color block bracelet. So we have the link below of our store on our Etsy page. You'll see it on the screen, and it'll be in the description show notes as well. So if you want to check it out, we thoroughly appreciate that. And outside of that commercial, we're going to go into our next segment, which is Medically Adultish Guidebook.
Medically Adultish Guidebook.
So often with young adults who are dealing with chronic illness and disability, you're not only trying to navigate your life with your diagnosis, but you're also just trying to figure out your own lane and identity as you're growing up and coming into your own. So if you add on the layer of young people now dealing with medical traumas and that PTS, that's just a whole other layer that they now need to navigate through. And especially if it impacts sort of your daily routine or parts of what are your daily routine. So today with my 3 guests, we're going to build out some advice that we would add into a guidebook on this for all of you that would be dealing with these different experiences. So I'm going to start with Darlene this time. We're going to jump back with Darlene again. So Darlene, like you had mentioned that as a parent who you have 2 young adult daughters as well. When you have a child that deals with PTS, you not only want to be supportive of them, but you want them to also then have tools to be able to support themselves. So what have been the best pieces of advice that you've gotten that would be good for other parents or caregivers that are in that situation?
Yeah. It's hard as a parent because you immediately go into fix mode. Which Lauren has shared with me all the time. She's like, I don't need you to fix this. I just need you to hear me and just see where I'm at. So that was a hard moment. So as a parent, I think a big piece of advice is don't go into fix mode. Go into holding space mode because there's nothing you can do in that moment other than just love them and support them and offer, oh my gosh, this is horrible kind of a response. And I think the other big piece of advice is as parents, we sometimes need to shift our expectations. When you have children, you have expectations of how this whole event is supposed to go of having children and growing up and the avenues that they're going to take. And when, health issues happen or other traumatic experiences happen, it's a complete shift into what we expected and what is now reality. And so, regrouping and dealing with, medical trauma, you really have to shift your expectations of maybe it's not going to be this, but now it's this. And we thought it might be that, but here they are doing this. And that's also can be a hard lesson at times because I think we're conditioned as parents that we're going to go a certain path. And, we did a 180 and you have to bring the entire family along with that too. So the sibling, I always, I have to throw out my support for siblings because they are experiencing a different type of trauma. And so for parents to recognize, and even as parents, the other advice is you're experiencing your own trauma, watching different things play out. So being able to seek help and support is critical. You can't carry it all, and you can't help your child. It's like we always hear the oxygen mask, right? I can't help my children if I'm not in a place that I can help, that I'm helping myself. So, it really is a full circle of navigating and being open to that things may change and it may go in a different direction than what we had previously thought. And that's okay, and coming to terms with that being okay, I think are the biggest pieces of advice and some of the hardest lessons that I've had to learn over the years and kind of holding up the mirror as a parent to see my own role in how I'm helping my children through the rest of this journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how you phrase that too, because we'll always say the phrase, you never want your sibling or parent to be the backseat driver. You want them to be a passenger in your journey. So you want them to help give you navigation tools and be the fun person, giving the music in the car and helping you out. But you don't want them to be the backseat driver, just trying to enable where you're going and what they want you to do. So that really kind of plays a similar role too when it comes to any sort of outsider in the support network, that they are able to help you figure out different triggers or help you find supportive tools for it. But then they have to be able to kind of just be the guiding hand behind it in a way. And only really insert themselves when they really feel like you're just kind of going in the wrong direction and entirely. And then Kimberly, on your end as a healthcare professional, we'll always say to so many young adults that they would want to talk to their doctor if they feel like they're dealing with different struggles or their different triggers from their health experiences. So what would you say as somebody in the doctor's seat, if you will, what would be the best piece of advice for them if they want to advocate for support or have questions on this portion, which is sort of outside of their diagnosis then, to their medical professionals?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I just want to put it out there. I think I can answer this question with two different hats on. So absolutely, as the professional and the person who's been pulled into the room to have these conversations, and also as someone who knows what it's like to sit on the other side as someone with my own chronic health conditions and having to navigate this. I sometimes in talking to colleagues, I'll say I wouldn't recommend acquiring a chronic disease necessarily as a professional development skill or tool, but in some ways it has opened my eyes to what it's like to be on the other side. So I think, a really good, important tip to put out there is just to get rid of the shoulds. And by that, I mean, try to get rid of that voice in your brain, or talk back to that voice in your brain that's telling you, you shouldn't be feeling like this, or you should know how to deal with this. You shouldn't be struggling with something that other people maybe don't think is such a big deal, or, I could keep going down that path. But I think recognizing that your needs and your experiences are important, and it's the job of your doctors, it's the job of your care team to be supporting you as a person. So I think you need to have some frame in your head for what good trauma-informed medical care looks like. So from our perspective in CPTS, that looks like you have a care team who is willing to recognize that parts of, or sometimes all of, navigating the healthcare system and having a chronic condition can be distressing. So recognizing that, providing emotional support, and then helping you pull in family members or people who are going to help support you. So I think you need to know that your care team has an obligation. And I have seen a really cool shift, I think, in the medical system. I can't say everywhere, but I think this sort of thing is more on the radar, that we want to be recognizing the impact that these experiences can be having and what that looks like for a person. So I think you want to know what to look for, know what good care should feel like, and then feel empowered to ask for what you need, to say to your doctor, hey, I'm having a hard time with this. Is there someone I can talk to? is there a community you can help connect me to? So I guess the best tip I have for advocating is to feel empowered to ask for what you think you need and to bring up a problem when a problem is there, because if your team doesn't know about it, they can't help you. So feeling comfortable asking for what you need is a huge first step, and I think probably the best tip I can give.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And total spoiler, being somebody chronically ill and working with chronically ill people, very easy perspective to work with. So I thoroughly agree with that. But I love that, because I had one doctor say to me when I was having an issue with one doctor I knew this type of healthcare treatment he wanted me to have was not going to work for what I wanted. It was going to bring about a traumatic experience for me, and I knew it. And him and I were disagreeing quite a bit on that. It was a different doctor of mine who then said, well, I'm going to tell you, he needs to compromise his choices without compromising your health. And we've gone through enough schooling that he can do that. Mm-hmm. And it was that kind of phrase that we bring that into InvisiYouth all the time, is compromise the situation without compromising your health. And like you said, if you feel that you're not being provided a situation or the type of care that would be as supportive for you as you need, to feel empowered enough to kind of ask then your medical community and ask your doctors, I really think I need something like this. Is there a way we can take out at least one portion of what you would need me to do for my treatment, just so I can like slowly build into it, or something else? Because then at least they know that you're still willing to do what is their best option, but you're also still taking kind of that proactive role in your health, because a lot of times you want to do what the doctors think are the best options, but you're just they're looking at your treatment making you better, your diagnosis, and you're looking at the whole picture of how their one decision will then domino effect into your personal life, your professional life. And then that's what they're not seeing as I said, is like the role going in the back of your head of what they're saying is, oh my God, how is this going to play out in everything else that I have to now deal with? And so that, like you said, is a really good point, is to know what you want and what looks like good care, and then be able to then ask for it and know that you can. Mm-hmm. Then Darlene, yeah, I know we're seeing hands being raised. That's how we're doing it.
I just wanted to chime in, Kim and Dominique, like, I love that. And that's such great advice. And what you just shared, Dominique, it made me think of how many times Lauren has shared that same thing of, I need you to see me as a whole person. I don't need you to look at me for this one thing that you might be trying to help me with, but I need for you to see my whole picture, my mind and body, not just why I might be in for this one visit, because that one decision could domino so many other aspects and areas of your life that your physician may not see. And, Kim, I loved how you said, you need to, you're not a mind reader, right? Your physician, your team, they're not mind readers, and you can't hint and hope like that they're going to know what you're talking about or what you're feeling or what you're worried about unless you can share that. And that's the beauty of that partnership with your medical team, is being able to share, even when you're feeling your most vulnerable, like these are the people that get you, and they're also advocating for you. And so I just wanted to share that, because it just struck in my heart that was really important.
No, I love that, because that's such a good point as well, because I know that resonates so well for you with your daughter, and then for so many other young people that's what that they want that for themselves, and they can kind of, that sort of second thought of, I know where this is going to start going negatively for me, and it's not my illness that's going to go south, it's other things. And that kind of goes really well into what I was going to then kind of end the segment on and ask Gaby specifically, was we can kind of talk so much about like noticing signs or triggers and wanting to seek support and ask for help. But then what are kind of those for young people and for young adults, what have you noticed are kind of like the best first steps of once they recognize, I feel like I'm dealing with something that's more of a medical trauma or a trigger to me? And how can I then go through those first steps of seeking assistance because I can notice it's now negatively impacting parts of my daily routine?
Yeah, and I think Darlene and Kim made some great points, about connecting with your parents, and not just parents, your friends, your family's support system, adults that you trust. Finding those connections to help you cope, and also with the pandemic, being in the pandemic, I'm sure has, made it more difficult, and, puts people at higher risk. So trying, to stay connected, because, especially teens, they might want to be left alone. But it's also important to spend that time, with friends and families and keeping in touch, whether that's, email, text, social media. And for older teens, they might find other things therapeutic, like, writing about their experiences and feelings, expressing them by writing poetry, songs, drawing, also getting back to just a normal routine, is really important. And everyone will be in different phases. So, some people with chronic illnesses might have long hospital stays. So just even being comfortable in the hospital and kind of developing a routine, in that environment. But, once they're home, also trying to get back to a normal condition, taking their physical condition into account, but doing your usual activities, and if you don't really feel like it at first, this is usually the best way to start feeling a little better. So even if you're like, I really don't want to do this, right? You should get up, get out, try to get back to these activities, make a plan for the week's activities, and, just starting with small steps, and building on these are really important.
Yeah, I love how you said a routine, because we'll every time I hear that, I'll have any of our university students will go, Dominique, that is so lame that you're telling me to keep a routine. Like, I get it. And I'm like, no, but it works. And I'll always say, I still even do it now. I mean, I've had my illness for 14 years and I still tell people if I'm dealing with something that's really kind of bogging me down with my health and it's starting to impact my work, I'll always say, even if I'm just completing small tasks, I give myself a little reward after finishing it. Not that like I'm telling everyone that I'm like reading a chapter in a book or like giving myself fresh coffee, but like little things that I know there's like an end goal to me being able to just complete something. And if you kind of do that, like you said, the sort of the repetition of that routine really does kind of snowball into filling you up a bit more, that if you then need additional support, and that's more external, you then feel at your best that you can at that moment to then go seek it, versus being so depleted that even if you're seeking that support and advice, you're running on empty than trying to get something into it. So even in that routine, like you said, trying to figure out, where are you hitting those roadblocks in the routine? Can I adapt around it? What can I add in here to just get to the next step? Because clearly my way of doing this isn't going to work anymore. I need to then adapt around it. And so that kind of allows you to then figure out a new structure of a routine that kind of makes you feel more whole and centered as a person while you're dealing with different things like that. So I think that's a really good point that you made. I like that. And see, other people think routines are good, guys. I'm not just the only one who thinks you should have a schedule. And so that was a good point to end our halfway point in our episode. And before we get to everyone's favorite time, and like I was spoiling, now it's going to be my story time session for our intermission. I just like to thank everybody again for checking out the InvisiYouth chat sessions. Like you guys know, it's part of our virtual programming that we provide, which is 5 different resources that come out every month with InvisiYouth charity that are for free for download and being able to access anywhere that you're at around the world for all teens and young adults who have chronic illness and disability and their support networks. So we always do just drop our donate link down below, and you'll see it pop up on the screen, just because all of our programming is provided for free. So all donations definitely do help us keep our lights on and keep our programming to be able to be provided for so many really deserving young people and their support networks. So we do thoroughly appreciate all the support that we get, and also hitting subscribe as well. We'll do that. So while this theme music is playing for So That One Time, just hit the subscribe button on where you're listening or watching this.
So that one time.
So that one time, you guys know, is where my guests usually tell me a story from their life, and I get surprised by their life story. But this time, we figured it might be an entire episode if all three of my guests told a life story. So I volunteered myself as tribute to tell my own story from my own PTS. So, and then we can have just a nice audience reaction to my story. So, as many people who know me through InvisiYouth, I developed my chronic illnesses starting from me being a competitive tennis player, and I got injured in off-season training. So, my injury came from essentially from me doing different serves and hit ground strokes with my coach at the time. So, and I noticed that because there was vibration in the racket, which is natural to tennis players playing when you have a strong grip. And so I obviously stopped playing from when I had that injury going through it. But what I didn't realize is over the different years is that anything in my left hand, which is where my injury started, and it's my dominant side, if something had that vibrating sensation, like a automatic toothbrush, or if I was using a mixer because I like to bake, I would immediately start to feel very panicked anytime I was holding something that would have that vibration sensation in it. So I would always just kind of ignore it and move forward. But as I got older through the years, it started to become, if I noticed something that might have that visceral reaction, I would just immediately ignore it. And I would become to the point of panic that I felt internally, I was like hyperventilating if somebody would tell me I had to grab it. And I had to then use my right hand. If I had to use my left hand, I would just refuse to do anything. So I always like to brush off my health issues because I never like to bother people. So that's how I would brush it off as a joke and say, oh, I'm fine, don't worry about it. So for me, I was in my freshman year of university, and I had to do a Spanish course where we had to film ourselves teaching people how to do things. So naturally, my partner wanted to teach people how to do a serve in tennis. Me being the people pleaser that I am was like, sure, I'll pick up a racket again, which I haven't done since my entire chronic illness started, and I'll serve on camera and speak in Spanish. That works great. So we go on the court. I'm doing everything in my power to not have to hit with this racket. I am throwing balls at her in my right hand. I am handing her rackets. I'm doing all of the talking I can in Spanish to avoid having to be the one to serve. And then she tells me that we both have to do it. It's written by the professor's instructions. We both have to serve. So luckily, my sister must have known subconsciously this was not going to be a good idea. She went to the same university I did, and I didn't know why she had shown up, but she showed up and said, I'm going to come because I'm going to help you. I'm putting in air quotes for you listening. I'm going to help you carry your tennis racket and your bag back to your dorm. I knew now later on that wasn't the main reason she went. She went because she knew something was probably going to happen. So the moment I go to hit with the racket, just the whole sensation of the vibration going through my hand up my arm with my racket, I immediately started hyperventilating, dropped the racket to the point that I was viscerally, I was blacked out. I don't remember having a conversation with my partner who I was working on the project with, don't remember the video stopping, and I don't remember my sister packing my stuff and walking me back to my dorm at all. The next thing I really remember after hitting it was me being in my dorm room, sitting on my bed, and my sister being with me. And so at that point, I realized how sort of severe this had built up to me. It went from me being anxious about that sort of reminder of thinking, oh, this vibration reminds me of my injury. And it then got to the point of going, okay, I'm so paranoid and worried that this is now going to reset where I was back at my initial diagnosis that I can't even go near it, to the point that I don't even remember 3 minutes of me walking around on a campus. So my sister knew that was probably not the end result of what was going to happen. She thought I would probably start crying. But I might have, I don't remember, but I think she thought that's what was going to happen. But I obviously took it into a very different direction. And she went, okay, I think we need to talk to mom about this. And we need to figure this out, because clearly you need to now, if you can't deal with this sensation, you need to be adamant to people that this is what happens. And you need to kind of stand up for yourself in this situation. So then moving forward now, anytime there is a situation where I notice that vibration sensation is happening, I'll immediately then just tell somebody, hey, this is really a physical trigger for me with my illness. I can't do this, so I need you to help. And I don't even ask, can you help me? I just say, I need you to do it. And it was sort of that shift in my language of not requesting assistance, but asking that it needs to be done for me, that I noticed really the 180 of other people just immediately stepping up for me to then support me, because I thought I was being demanding, asking for it. But then seeing that shift was probably the best thing for me then moving forward, was other people just knowing that if I was asking for them to then step in, that it must be something I really needed. So that's my fun story about why I don't film myself playing tennis any longer. There we go. There's PTSD for Dominique as a teenager.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that so openly. I know this is like what you do on the podcast, but I still want to like acknowledge that it's not easy to talk about things like that all the time. So I appreciate you trusting us and your audience to share that story. And I guess something I just noticed, and this is like my 100% psychologist hat on, but I saw you do a nice like reframing there, where you stopped at some point thinking about it like I'm inconveniencing people, or I should just be able to push through this. And you kind of reframed it to think about, well, this is what I need to be able to live the life I want and do the things I want. And I think sometimes that asking for help and recognizing where you need help, and this is true for me personally, absolutely too, that can sometimes be one of the hardest things. But framing it like, this is something I need that's going to allow me to do the things I want to do and live the life I want, is just a really cool thing to hear someone talk about and to see that in action.
No, well, thank you. I don't do that very often, so when I do, people know to hang in for it.
Yeah, props.
Thank you for sharing. I think one of the biggest things I took away from your story is how much your sister was such a big support for you. And I think Darlene had mentioned at one point how, siblings, are also affected by this, right? It's not just the patients, the entire family. So I think just, highlighting the importance of this can affect not just the patient, but the parents, the caregivers, the siblings. So they also, need support. So a shameless plug here, but, CPTS, as you mentioned, has healthcaretoolbox.org, where we have a lot of resources for providers, and not just providers, but also the entire family. We also work with this organization who they're also on our family advisory board. Dominique, as you know, Coping Space or Case for Smiles has a copingspace.org website, and it provides information to help parents understand and cope with their own responses to their child's life-changing illness or injury. But they also actually just created a new website called SibSpace, and it provides resources to support youth through their siblings' diagnosis and treatment and beyond. So really great resources for siblings to check out.
That was a great story, Dominique. And I agree with Kim and Gaby, first for putting yourself in that vulnerable spot, with always your beautiful sense of humor and grace. And I wanted to hug you as I was listening to that. That had to be a really hard moment for you to be in. And as a fellow people pleaser, I totally see how you got yourself into that situation. I loved how you navigated it and, what you began to do, which a lot of young adults and even old adults don't always know how to do, is to create those boundaries, right? Of here's what's going to help me do this, or here's something I absolutely cannot do because this is this is how it will impact me. Boundaries are hard, especially when you're a young adult, because there's so many, I think, social things at play that impact why somebody may not let somebody know why I can't hold that racket, or what you knew going in exactly what it was going to do. And your friend had no idea. And so I appreciated how you kind of, worked through that. And kudos to your sister. I was laughing when she's like, we got to tell mom. It was so classic sister moment, right? We're telling mom. And, to be able to recognize, like, I think we need a little bit more help here. You need to address this. And that's a good sister right there, to be able to call that out and help you see, like, yeah, we got to work on that. And for you to be open to it and not defensive and, like you didn't experience this. You don't know what it's like. And, to be able to have been in the space to say, okay, I think I need to, readjust how I work through these moments. So kudos to you for that.
Oh, thank you. And shout out to my sister, Erica. We all know Erica, she'll love a good shout out. She did. She was like, something's happening. I'm just going to show up because she won't suggest it if I don't do it anyway. So knowing that for sure. And then, going into our final segment, we're going to be building you guys a quick little toolkit. Since we all work with CPTS and they have a toolbox, we're going to give you a quick little toolkit. Here's what's in your toolkit.
What's in your toolkit? What's in your toolkit?
What's in your toolkit? Like I said at the top of the show, CPTS is celebrating its 20th anniversary, and they have done so much work in the last 20 years. One of the things that we love the most is the Healthcare Toolbox that they have, with so many different resources that help not only young people living with these different medical traumas and triggers and needing support, but then also their family members and the medical staff that supports them. So we're going to then kind of, in celebration of that, share with you guys some quick tools that we think would be great for so many young people to utilize and types of advice to seek support in. So, Gaby, I'm going to start with you. I know for so many people, they'll just immediately go to Google and try to look up their own type of PTS and medical trauma and just go through their journey of trying to support themselves. So what have you seen from people who interact with the Healthcare Toolbox are really sort of the most utilized, or not in everything's the best on that website, but obviously shameless plug, InvisiYouth is listed there too. But like, what would you say these are really common tools that all see people will be gravitating towards that are really beneficial for young people?
Well, as you said, Dominique, everyone's kind of into Google, right? Like everyone Googles everything. So, online resources, right? And self-guided materials are really, really popular. I think people are looking for things that they can kind of do on their own time. And, kind of take as long as they want. So yes, healthcaretoolbox.org, is our website. We also have, aftertheinjury.org, which is another website run by CPTS for families of injured children. I mentioned the Coping Space and SIB Space websites. And also another tip is to, look for networks, for the illnesses or diseases that, you're dealing with, so it could be like a rare disorder. But a lot of these, disorders and illnesses have support groups, right? Like national groups. Like we work with the Dravet Syndrome Foundation that connects caregivers and siblings with their family network. We also they are also on our CPTS Healthcare Toolbox website. So we do have a lot of links that we link out to, and just some tips about, using reliable sources, so asking, whether it's at school, your teacher, librarian, which resources, they recommend, so you can sort out the fact from fiction, right? So look for reliable sources, government sites that end in .gov, educational sites ending in .edu are usually safe bets. .org websites are usually run by nonprofit organizations, and they could also be good resources, but also, you need to weed that out because, there's wikipedia.org, which is not, your best resource. So, checking with a parent or a trusted adult. And when you use commercial websites ending in .com, check to see if the site has advertising, because sometimes they could be biased or trying to sell a product. And with things like blogs, personal sites, social media sites, YouTube, Facebook, Tumblr, there's so much information, right? But also be aware that, a lot of those kind of websites are giving you personal opinions, rather than facts. So really looking for those trusted, resources is huge.
Yeah. And like you said, it's if you find something that you think you're gravitating towards, but then do the background research to support that, that's a great place to go. We'll even say if you find other nonprofits like ours, it's listed right away. We're 501c3. You can look that up and fact check that we're not lying about that after you Google us. So it's doing that sort of second step after you find something that is supportive. But like you said, something that's great with the Healthcare Toolbox is sort of that independent, free guided resources that are there, that it's something you can kind of utilize on your own. You can kind of send the link to a family member or guardian without it even being like a dinner table conversation, that it's just sort of click it, see what you think. And then that really is helpful for other people to then kind of take the ball themselves and move forward a bit too, is knowing that everything kind of allows you to do things independently, but then there's also access and knowledge of how to then seek support beyond doing it all on your own, which is really great. And then Kimberly, on your end, as from a healthcare provider standpoint, do you think there's like a quick piece of advice you would say to young people that are feeling like maybe their healthcare experience, they're dealing with a bit of trauma in trying to navigate that conversation with their doctor? How would you kind of like reassure them to kind of give it that try another time, or seek other types of healthcare professionals if they've dealt with it within their healthcare experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I just want to thank Gaby too for summing up how to use the internet so well, because I think again, from the provider perspective and my own experiences, like any deep, dark hole your brain has gone down at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep, you will find something on the internet to validate that worry. And that does not mean it's true or it's a good source. So I think that's one of the most important things, like knowing how to use the internet in a way that's actually helpful to you. To get, I guess, at that advice for wanting to improve your experience when you realize something's not feeling good, I think I can't stress enough asking your trusted network, someone at your center, your doctor from your team, where you can go for support. So I think a lot of like big academic centers, they'll often have social workers or psychologists or people they can refer you right to who can help. But having those conversations, asking for support, and to get back to that idea of reframing or changing the way we think about things, instead of seeing that as a sign that you're not handling it as well as you should be, or you're seeing it as kind of a personal limitation. I would just really encourage you to think about it as this is an important part of your health and your ability to live the life that you want. So asking for help is a strength. I 100% believe that. So looking at your network and asking the people you trust, letting them know you need help and asking them where to go is probably the best piece of advice I can give. If your doctor doesn't know, they should be able to help you find someone who does. And if you're met with a reaction that makes you feel bad for asking, I would maybe consider that to be more a reflection of the provider. And, is that someone you really want to be working with versus a reflection of you doing something wrong? Asking for help is a strength.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Darlene, you're going to end and give us you're going to give us a good ending one sentence here. So if there was something that for your end with your daughter, Lauren, if she was going to kind of say, this is the one thing that worked the best for me talking to my family members or support network about what I'm dealing with, that I need additional support outside of my diagnosis, what would be the thing that resonated the most with you as a parent that you think would be good for other young people to hear that they could then maybe pass along to their family members?
Okay, in one sentence, that's a lot of questions.
You can make it a run on.
I would say I said it before, not to be a fixer as a parent, and to really kind of pull back that lens and recognize that, it may not be what you thought your child needed, but it's what your child needs. And it's not about you as a parent. This is about your child's health. And while that impacts your whole family, it's not her, what she's going through is not about me. And it's not a reflection of me as a parent. What do I need to do? And asking, how can I best support you right now? Not help. I've learned that recently. Not help. How can I best support you right now has been a game changer in how we communicate and making sure and being open to the fact that it's okay that other people can help your child, right? It's not a one parent fits all. It's a village, right? And if your child needs to see a psychologist, then yes, and yes. If your family needs that, yes, and yes. It's okay.
Perfect. I love that. Thank you so much to the three of you, to Gaby, Kimberly, and Darlene. Gaby, where can people find CPTS and Healthcare Toolbox on social media and online so they can get access to these resources and everything that they're celebrating for their 20th anniversary this month?
Yeah. So for more information on CPTS, you can visit healthcaretoolbox.org. You can also follow us on all our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Ped Trauma Stress. And we also have a webinar series in September that InvisiYouth will also be tweeting about. So go check that out, and we will be tweeting about it with more information on that. And we have one that's specific for parents called Coping with Children's Injury and Illness, Resources for Families. And Kim is actually one of the presenters for that webinar, which will be September 28th.
Perfect. Like I said, that's all going to be linked below, and you'll see it in the post show notes as well about those webinars too, so you can check it out. And as always, you can find InvisiYouth on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at InvisiYouth, and you could subscribe to our podcast on any audio podcast platform and our YouTube channel at InvisiYouth. So thank you, ladies, for so much for being my first group panel discussion podcast, if you will. I had a lot of fun. And for everyone listening and watching, I will speak with you all soon. Bye, everybody.